Sometimes, the quietest words hold the loudest truths. This is one of them. It started with a box I found in my mother's attic. I wasn't looking for anything. I just wanted to feel close to her again, somehow. The house was too quiet after the funeral. Empty, like it had stopped breathing. The attic smelled like time. Dust, old wood, forgotten winters. I climbed the creaky ladder, not knowing what I was searching for. And then I saw it, behind a stack of photo albums and a broken floor lamp. A wooden box. Small. Faded. The kind of thing that looks like it remembers things you don't. No lock. Just a simple latch. I opened it on the floor, cross-legged like a child. Inside were letters. Dozens. Maybe more. Tied together with a blue ribbon, frayed at the edges. Each envelope was addressed the same way. To Evelyn. That was my mother's name. I felt a chill. Not fear, but the kind of stillness that comes when something old suddenly feels alive. The handwriting was careful, almost delicate, like someone who never rushed their words. At the bottom of each letter, just a single initial. A. I didn't know anyone named A in my mother's life. Not in her stories. Not in her photos. Not in her past, as far as I knew. I unfolded the top letter, slowly. The paper felt like it could turn to dust in my hands. My dearest Evelyn, if the light still falls through your kitchen window the way it used to, I hope it reminds you of me. I read 3 letters that day. They were filled with memories I didn't recognize. A voice I had never heard, but that somehow felt familiar. And just like that, I knew there was a part of my mother's life I had never been allowed to see. The next morning, I called Aunt Miriam. She was my mother's younger sister, the only one left who might remember anything worth remembering. We hadn't spoken in months, maybe longer. But when she picked up, her voice was soft. Almost like she had been waiting for this call. Sweetheart, is everything all right? I told her about the attic. The box. The letters signed with A. There was silence. Not awkward, just heavy. You found them, she said quietly. I didn't know they were still up there. Who was he? I asked. Another pause. His name was Andrew. He was special. A part of your mother's life she never shared with many people. Was he her first love? More than that, Miriam said. He was the one she never stopped loving. I felt something tighten in my chest. All those years, all the stories I thought I knew, and she never once mentioned his name. Why didn't she tell me? Because it hurt too much to say it out loud, Miriam whispered. Because some love stories don't end. They just go quiet. She gave me an address. A small cottage by the sea. Your mother used to go there once a year alone. I asked her why once, Miriam said. She just smiled and said, some places hold pieces of us that no one else can carry. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, the letters spread out in front of me. I opened another one, dated 1979, the year before I was born. It read like a goodbye, but not a final one. More like someone who believed there would always be another chance. And in the last line, he wrote something that stayed with me long after I folded the page. If there's still a window with morning light, I'll wait. The drive took 4 hours. Past towns I didn't know the names of, past gas stations that looked like they hadn't been open in years. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that softens everything. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. A locked door, maybe. An empty house swallowed by time. But when I turned off the narrow coastal road, I saw it. A small cottage tucked between the cliffs and the ocean, paint peeling, windows weathered but intact. It didn't look abandoned. It looked paused. I walked up the steps slowly, heart steady but unsure. There was no lock on the door. Just an old iron handle that gave way with a quiet click. The air inside smelled like salt, paper, and something faintly floral, like lavender that had long since dried. Everything was still, but nothing felt dead. A teacup sat on the table. A faded curtain moved gently in the wind. And in the corner of the room, under a window that looked out toward the sea, was a wooden chair. I stood there for a long time, trying to picture her, my mother, sitting here. Reading, writing, thinking. Maybe crying. There was a desk against the wall. On it, a small stack of journals, neatly arranged. Not hers. His. The first one I opened had her name on the first page. Just her name. Evelyn. No dates. No titles. Just pages and pages of handwriting. Thoughts, memories, sketches of mornings and dreams that never came true. And one sentence that repeated itself, again and again in the margins. The window still has light. I spent the next 2 days in that cottage. No phone. No noise. Just the sea outside and the sound of old pages turning. Andrew's journals weren't polished. They weren't written for anyone but her. Some entries were only a few lines. Others filled entire pages, like he couldn't stop the words once they came. There were no dates. No structure. But as I read, I began to see something forming. A rhythm. A voice. A man I had never met but who felt strangely close. He wrote about small things. The sound of Evelyn's laugh when she burned toast. The way her hair curled slightly behind her ear when it rained. How she hummed to herself when she didn't know anyone was listening. He also wrote about the pain. How love had become something they carried apart. How choices, family, fear, time had pushed them in different directions. One line hit harder than the rest. It was written in the corner of a page, almost like a whisper. Some people are meant to stay. Others are meant to stay inside you. I closed the journal and sat quietly. The window was glowing with the last light of the day. Golden. Soft. The same way he had described it over and over. It made me wonder, had my mother read these too, in this same light? Had she come here to remember, or to keep forgetting? I reached into the box of letters I had brought with me and found one I hadn't opened yet. It was sealed differently. Not even. Just folded once and taped shut. On the outside, a single line in that same delicate script. For when the window feels empty. My hands hesitated before I opened it. The paper felt heavier somehow, as if it had been waiting too long to be touched. I peeled the tape slowly. Inside was one page. Only one. But before I read it, I noticed something strange. It wasn't addressed to Evelyn. It didn't start with her name. It started with mine. Not a full name. Just an initial. Same as his. But this time, to ease child. I stopped breathing for a moment. The air in the cottage seemed to shift. The sea felt farther away. I read the letter in silence, each word pressing deeper into me. You don't know me, but I knew one day you might come here. If you're reading this, it means she never stopped loving me. And it means I never stopped hoping you'd find your way. I'm not here to explain her choices. Or mine. But I want you to know this. Your mother was never weak. She chose the life she thought was best for you. For both of you. I loved her. Not once, not briefly, always. Even in absence. Especially in absence. She came here to remember, not to regret. She left you with light. And in that light, you'll find her again. I left something for you. Not answers, but pieces. You'll know when you see it. Be kind to her memory. And don't be afraid to carry the parts of her you don't understand. That's where the real stories live. I read it again. And then again. Not because I didn't understand, but because a part of me suddenly did. There was only one door in the cottage I hadn't opened. It was at the end of the hallway, half hidden behind an old coat rack and a dusty painting of a boat on the sea. I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe I hadn't wanted to. The handle turned with a dry click. Inside, the air felt different, colder, untouched. The curtains were drawn, but the light still managed to find its way in, through the thinnest space. The room was small, simple. A bed, still made. A chair by the window. And on the nightstand, a single photograph in a wooden frame. It was her. My mother. younger than I had ever seen her. Next to her stood a man, smiling gently, like someone who knew he shouldn't hold on too tightly. He had dark hair, quiet eyes, and a presence that made everything else in the room fade. So that was him. Andrew. I sat on the bed and stared at the photo. It wasn't just the two of them. There was something in the way she looked at him, not like a moment, but like a lifetime. On the floor beside the chair, there was a small wooden box. Inside were little things, meaningless to anyone else. A shell, a train ticket, a key, and a note written in familiar ink. The light still finds this room. That means it's still ours. I stayed there for a long time, not speaking, not moving. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything they had lost, and everything they had left behind for someone like me to find. I left the cottage the next morning. The sea was quieter than before. Or maybe I was. I didn't take much with me. Just one journal, one letter, and the photograph. The drive home felt different. The roads were the same, but something inside had shifted. Not broken, not healed, just realigned. Back at the house, I walked into my mother's kitchen. The morning light fell through the window, just like he wrote. Soft, slanted, golden. For the first time in my life, I saw it the way she must have. Not as just a kitchen, but as a memory in motion. As a space where someone had once stood and loved, deeply, quietly, always. I placed the photo on the windowsill, right where the light touched the frame. And for a moment, I swore I could hear her voice. Not words, just presence. Like she was saying, I'm still here. You finally see me now. I made tea, sat at the table, opened the journal, and read a single line I had underlined in pencil. What we leave behind isn't what people remember. It's what they feel when the room goes quiet. That afternoon, I began writing. Not to her, not to him, but to myself. To the version of me that had always believed there was more, and now knew it didn't need to be explained, only honored. Weeks passed. The box stayed near my desk unopened, but never forgotten. I didn't need to read more. Not yet. Some days, I'd find myself staring out the window, cup in hand, sunlight on my skin. And I'd wonder if she had done the same. If the light was her way of speaking. If silence was her language, after all. I started writing letters. Not to anyone. Just into the air. To the past. To the people I miss. To the versions of myself I've outgrown. I never signed them. Just folded them once and left them by the window. One day I'll let them go. Maybe I'll burn them. Maybe I'll leave them in the cottage. Maybe I won't do anything at all. But I understand now. The box wasn't meant to be a secret. It was a bridge. Not for answers, but for feeling. For carrying forward what couldn't be said in life. The last words in Andrew's journal had no punctuation. No ending. Let the window stay open. So I did. And some days, when the light hits just right, I swear I still feel them both.